Hi, I'm Montana York, and I'm your host here at Cambridge House. And I'm joined today by the one and only Willem Middelkoop, the founder of the Commodity Discovery Fund. Willem, thank you for being here.
So nice to be on the show, back on the show again.
It's great to have you back. Yeah. Willem, I would love to start off with just an overview into the Commodity Discovery Fund.
I started the Commodity Discovery Fund in 2008. I was a private investor in this space since 2002, 2003. And almost by accident, I discovered that when you invest, when you concentrate on the smaller companies being responsible for the larger discoveries, it gives an extra return. So that they do better than if you just start investing in majors like Newmont or Barrick. So then I started to tweak my portfolio. That was in 2004, 2005. And I even started a newsletter, which was called Middelkoop in which I alerted investors worldwide on best discovery holes or great drill holes. And then somebody said, "You're stupid, you sell your best tips for $99. You should build a fund around it." And that's how it all started. And we started with only 3 million in 2008, just some friends and family money. And now we are over 200 million, and we have almost 2,000 high net worth investors from everywhere.
Great. That being said, I would love to jump into what's catching your eye in the market right now and talk about commodities a little bit.
Yeah, of course, we had a severe downturn after 2011. It almost took a decade, because if you look at the chart, March 2020 actually was the low also in our fund. That was the crash, the Corona crash, the COVID crash. And since then, we went from a very difficult market to almost a perfect storm. Hours. You have the debasement of currency, you have very high inflation, you have the shortages of commodities, you have geopolitical tension, and that's why investments in precious metals and other commodities are so popular right now. And we see that in our fund. We have huge inflow. Last year, we had 50 million euros, so that's, let's say, 70 million Canadian. This year, we're on track to reach the same amount. And there's a real change of sentiment among high net worth investors. They really want to have exposure now towards commodities.
Great. And then I did see a tweet recently where you said that Bitcoin is going to be the currency that eats up all other currencies. And I would love to touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, you always have this fight among the gold bucks and the crypto crowd, but we should be brothers. Gold and Bitcoin actually are brothers. And I'm an author of a few books, and in the Dutch edition of The Big Reset, I wrote that one in 2013. I called Bitcoin the digital gold. I was stupid enough not to act on it, because I had enough gold and silver in my portfolio myself, so I didn't buy it. But I recognized that the way Bitcoin is structured, it makes it like digital gold, because you have only 21 million units which can be mined, and that makes it very special. And that makes it very rare. And more investors worldwide recognize this special fact for Bitcoin. And you should have it in your portfolio both. So you should have the precious metals, and you should have Bitcoin, and you should have real estate and some stock, some equity, and then you'll do very well in this environment.
Great. And then I would also love to touch on another tweet that you had about Elon Musk and how he lured the voting class into basically voting against free speech, and just see what's there for you.
Well, Elon Musk, of course, he likes to touch on specific and sensitive topics, and we all are aware that we've seen a huge amount of at the end of free speech, one could say, in the last few years. There's real censorship among big tech. If you look at specific topics like COVID or other sensitive topics, there's real censorship. And I think many people are fed up with this big tech censorship. Elon Musk is one of them. So by actually saying that he wants to be a board member of Twitter, by buying the stock, he owns almost 10%, he really tries to take control. He wants to take back to the community and restore free speech. And it of course, it's if you think about it, Donald Trump, whether you like him or not, he's just banned from Twitter. How can this be possible in the land of the free?
Mm-hmm. Right. And then do you think Elon getting these shares, do you think that's a step towards free speech on Twitter, or what other action do you think it's going to have?
Well, at least there's a discussion now. And I think that's great by having Elon taking action. And I think he wasn't accepted as a board member. And I understand why, because if you have a guy like him as a board member, he will take over the board and he should be chairman and kick everybody out. So I think that's a step too far. But it's a huge sign, and it's a very clear message to the world that we have to stop the censorship.
Right. And then I'd love to segue into geopolitics and see what's there for you, what predictions you have, or what you're seeing, what impacts you're seeing.
Yeah, as I said, I'm the author of The Big Reset. The Big Reset, the undertitle was The War on Gold and the Financial Endgame. It has been my opinion that after the Lehman crisis, after the great financial crisis of 2008, we're in the endgame of the current US dollar system. The current US dollar system, of course, was started in 1944 in Bretton Woods. And actually, I wrote on the back cover of the Big Reset that around 2020, large changes would be needed to an international financial system, and we would need to find a new anchor, and we would also need to have a new Bretton Woods conference to discuss these topics among world's leading trade partners. And what we see now, what we witness now, and I think the war in Ukraine is also pointing to this, that people are fed up with the way the US is treating other major trading partners. So it's a very sure sign that even the Saudis are actually joining Russia now, joining China now. They're not helping the West with sanctions. So we have the sanctions now against Russia. But if you study it, the sanctions are always only installed by countries from the West. If you make a calculation, that's only around 1.5 billion people, and all the other countries, in Latin America, Middle America, and Africa, and Asia, that's 6 billion people. They don't have sanctions, so there's a very strong war, one could say, a larger war, a geopolitical war between the West and the rest of the world, and the rest of the world is fed up with the US dollar system and the way the US is treating and using the dollar as a weapon. And I think that's a very serious concern, and that's why we need changes coming to the world's financial system.
And then what do you think those changes are going to be, Willem?
Well, there was a very interesting piece of research written by one of the more senior people of Credit Suisse, the Swiss bank. And he wrote, these were 3 articles, all written after the start of the Ukraine war. And actually, he has been calling for the start of Bretton Woods 3.0, as he calls it. And it's his analysis that we have really entered a new phase for world's monetary system, in which we see a move away from the dollar, and there will be more and more support for the Asian axis, in which more and more countries besides the West will start to use gold and commodities as some kind of backing of a new financial system. And the recent moves, which we've seen coming from Russia, in which Russia tells the world, you can have our oil, you can have our gas, but then you have to pay in the currency we demand. You can pay with gold, you can even pay with Bitcoin, but we won't accept your euros, we won't accept your dollars. And that's a very clear sign. And it's not only Russia, but also China is supporting a move like this. And it's very interesting interesting to see what the Saudis are doing, because the Saudis are supporting and are of course backing the petrodollar deal, which was originated in the 1970s. And if the Saudis choose to sell that oil for other currencies than the dollar, then we have a real change within this monetary system.
And then we touched on commodities and gold a little bit, Willem. I'd love to hear what other impact you think that this is going to have on our markets.
Yeah, I think we see huge changes now, not only because many sovereign countries are fleeing more towards gold now for the national reserves, because they are also scared by the dollar being used as a weapon. They're also scared by the US actions and the actions from the West, in which the financial reserves of Russia were almost confiscated. So I think you'll see a move away from paper assets into hard assets. But the crisis in the Ukraine and Ukrainian war have also pointed to the scarcity of many commodities. So we have a shortage coming in many of the metal markets. Look at what happens to palladium. Look at what at the short squeeze we've seen with nickel. So more and more investors will learn that there's a real question about the security of supplies, and this will really help commodity investors, because commodity investors have been ignoring all these facts for quite some time, and especially the general investors. If you look at the general investment funds, they have often less than 1% of half of percent of their capital invested in commodities. I think that percentage will rise now, so the move towards commodities will become much stronger.
Great. And then are you comfortable telling us what percentage you see that rising to?
Well, there was another study by one of the major banks, and they said that on average, commodities can go up another 30-40%, because it's still undervalued in their opinion. And if you look at the equities related to commodities, if you look at the gold miners, the silver miners, they're still trading well below averages, which we've seen in the last decades. So they're not trading at rock bottom prices and valuations anymore, but it's close to the bottom. And there's still a huge way to go back to the mean. Reverse to the mean is to be expected. And I think we all know how commodity markets trade. If the equities start to run, you'll have these amazing runs, which will bring returns of 100% in a year. That's easy possible, especially in the junior space.
Great. Do you have any further market predictions you'd like to share with us today, Willem?
Well, we didn't touch on uranium, but I think uranium is very interesting, because everything we discussed, the geopolitical side, the energy side, the shortages, it's all playing into the hands of uranium investors. It's a very small market. Almost 10% of our fund is invested in uranium. And I think uranium will do very well. And especially, we always had a large position in next-gen energy, being the best uranium discovery of the last, I think 10 to 20 years. And next-gen energy is in the developing stage of that project. And it won't be long before that they will be taken out, I think.
Great. Anything further than uranium for the markets?
We touched briefly on silver, but I think silver is overlooked. Everything I said about gold is also, silver is poor man's gold, so they go hand in hand. And often you see silver gaining much faster once the bull market becomes more mature. So I think silver has a lot of catch up to do. And if you look at the graphs, we're recording this April 19th. We see a breakout in the silver equities. So I think that there's quite a good bet now.
Great. And Willem, if my listeners wanted to find more or hear more from you, where would they find you?
They find me on Twitter, so Google my name, and they can find more information about our fund, Commodity Discovery Fund. We're also open for Canadian investors and American investors.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.